Welcome to Live Sense8. I'm Sheila Applegate.
And I'm Zac Hansen.
And a special shout out to Justin Applegate for the composition of the Live Sense8 podcast music. In this podcast, we dive deep into the concepts of consciousness and other interesting trivia in the Netflix Original Series Sense8. We're doing an episode-by-episode exploration of how we can live a Sense8 life. And we're also talking with cast and crew and team members of Sense8 to hear the experience from their perspective.
Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by Marisa Dranchak, Conscious Life Coach. Discover how vibrant life can be. You can find out more about Marisa at myconsciouslifecoach.com. And Divine Phoenix Books. Books with a purpose for a positive change. Check out Divine Phoenix Books at divinephoenixbooks.com.
In this segment, we talk about what's going on in the world of Sense8. It is December, and that means that we are in the middle of the Sense8 rewatch. Of course, this means that you are encouraged to rewatch Sense8 this month as often as possible. Also, let's offer some tweets and posts on social media that will spark people's interest about the show and maybe bring to it new viewers. On January 25th, Zac and I will be in San Francisco doing a live audience Live Sense8 podcast recording. We're going to have an amazing panel of actors. We have Michael Summers, who plays Bug. We have Maximilian Ewalt, who plays Grace, Amanita's mom. And we have Sandra Fish, who plays Janet, Nomi's mom. We also have Tino Rodriguez and Virgo Pariso. They played the green and purple fairies, the notorious givers of the brownies and changing of consciousness. They're also amazing artists. If you've listened to their podcast, you'll know what an incredible duo these two are. So we're very excited to be able to spend some time talking, to get live audience questions, and to really explore some different avenues with these amazing cast members. Tickets are available now. We will have the link on the webpage. It is an intimate evening, so grab your ticket as soon as possible for close up and personal with Sheila, Zac, and the cast. If you are in the San Francisco area for that, the following day, Zac and I will be offering a fractal illumination gathering. For those of you who are interested in learning more about this gathering, we have a couple spaces left for that as well.
Season 2, Episode 5, Fear Never Fixed Anything. Directed by James Mateague, created by Lily and Lana Wachowski and J. Michael Straczynski. Written by Lana Wachowski and J. Michael Straczynski.
Interesting episode going on here.
Oh, yeah. Good episode. Great episode.
Yeah? You liked it?
Yes, it's pretty good.
Just, one of the rare ones that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, every once in a while they nail it.
Yeah, I'd say like every episode.
Well, yeah.
Well, maybe not. Okay, maybe.
There are some episodes where you're like, yeah, this is just an okay episode, and then you get slammed at the end. Yeah. So I don't know if I've hit an episode yet that by the end I didn't say, oh my God, this was amazing. Anyway, so today, in this episode, some of the things that are going on. So they open up by the whole cluster together, basically kind of stunned by Jonas's death. And I don't even know if I would say grieving. They're just in that sort of like aftermath of experiencing that, and then the questioning of what do we do now, which becomes a theme for this really big turning point episode.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a turning point episode.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Then we move in, and Cappius is asked to run for office. He's got some people coming knocking on his door. I thought that one was interesting because he asks them where they're from, and they're saying they understand, but they're not actually from his area. And I watched This Is Us, and so there's a story arc going on there where one of the characters is wanting to help a neighborhood that his father lived in, and he doesn't live in it, but he wants to be a politician there because his heart is with them. And it's just an interesting theme to watch that in both right now, because we think someone from the inside has to be the one to understand, but then there's the other side of sometimes someone who's empathic or understanding can see the big picture. Sometimes being a little bit away can actually assist in seeing. So there's two sides to that, really.
Yeah, just a different perspective.
Yeah, and sometimes the people that are in it are so caught up in it they can't see clearly to lead the people to another level. So,
yep.
I mean, that was like one little tiny scene, but it caught my eye, especially because I'm watching the other show. And
you know what caught my eye in that particular scene?
What? Oh, yeah, I do know.
Yeah. So Cappius is there. The camera's on Cappius as he's looking at these people as he's asked them to leave, and they look back at Cappius, and the camera's on him, and behind him is the poster of Van Damme over his shoulder.
Yeah,
Super
that's
cool.
a good scene. That's a good catch. I hadn't seen that. Then we have Sun, and I wrote in my notes that she's going home to her family, because she really is. She's greeted by her dog, who I think is her family, and then by her sensei teacher. Really the most gentle, loving family figure, the one person in the world who helped her grow up and know who she is, and the one person that really sees her.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty exciting. There's this innocence when she first gets there, this lightheartedness, which actually kind of goes into the first clip we're going to talk about, so I'll get back to that. But there's this lightheartedness of coming home. Later on, Detective Moon. Do you call him Detective Moon or Moon? I always say Moon in my head because, like the yin yang.
I don't know.
Because we call Sun, and Moon. I mean, I think it's like an in between.
Whoa, my mind just got blown. Is that the sun and moon?
Are you serious? Okay, you're not. He's not, guys. You
like
scared
two
me
peas
for
in
a second.
pod.
Anyway, I love that yin and yang kind of. It's cool, but I don't know if we just, as the fans, started to call. Like, I wanted to go back and say, what are they saying, or am I just calling them that?
Duna Bay, I believe I pronounced that right. She gets me often. She just has, I don't know, her the way she can act on her emotional intelligence. Like,
yeah,
she just rolled up in that place after. We don't know how long she's been in jail, but a lot of people, not just from being in jail, because that's not easy on anybody. And the whole scandal with her family, and then people tried to murder her a lot.
A lot.
She tried to get,
and she
didn't
murdered
try,
people
yeah,
in return.
right? So you have the one person almost in the world that has known you for a long time, and she just kind of is still trying to hold herself up, but at the same time just needs to just shed one tear that we got to see in the scene at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a good job.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then we've got Kala in this deep thought and contemplation, and we're going to talk about Kala's scenes a little bit in a minute. Will talks to Whispers in London, so that's different because now he's actually going to him instead of Whispers always pretty much coming to him. It's just there's a different energy
Outside of that room.
Yeah, there's a different energy to that. And Nomi's gonna die. Die an e-death.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty wild Yeah, anonymous. Pretty wild scene going on there. Leto is invited. So there's a scene where Leto and his crew are looking at the manuscripts, and there's just not really good options. And then they get excited for him because Hernando and Danny get excited because he was invited to be a Grand Master at a Pride parade. And he's scared. He's scared about the whole process of having come out, not on his own time necessarily, but one of the things I loved about that is it's like what I teach with emotions and things. We work at avoiding things or keeping things at bay or trying not to go where we don't want to go. But I have a meditation called the Ring of Fire, and it's about like once you're halfway there, you got to keep going. Like if you're trying to get outside the ring of fire and you go part way and then you go back, you just got to start all over. So it's like you have to go in to get out. And so the idea of him diving deeper in to his identity as a gay actor as a way of reclaiming and finding the fullness of himself. Tiny little line, but it caught me. And then we've got Riley is being supportive, but then she really kind of nails it at the end, and we're going to do her scene. She plays an integral role, and one of the ways we then see Riley really stepping into her power of what her gifts were prior to the cluster and how she brings them in for the first time, really. Wolfgang, he gets this scene. He's seduced by Leela.
I love Wolfgang.
Yeah.
He's such a badass.
Wolfgang. But one of the things I noticed with that is she said, you might not want to admit it, but we need each other. And he said, you're wrong. I don't need anyone. You know, that's that vulnerability. He's really struggling with the idea of trusting, I think, even the cluster, you know, just being codependent in that way. In a healthy way, but that's scary to someone who's been in survival mode.
Oh, for sure. And is it really codependency when you're literally these other people?
Right. You know, I mean, when I said codependency, I immediately flashed back to my life as a clinical therapist, and that term was used as a basically dysfunction. If someone was codependent, you needed to help them. I wasn't looking at it in that way when I said it, like an interdependency, because even though they're one cluster, they're 8 individual people. And so that is an intricate interdependency.
Right. Now that they're all in each other's heads, they can't really all not be in each other's heads.
Right.
There's no going back. Well, as far as we know, I guess he could just like
a little black
throw down some blockers for a while.
Take a little break.
So how about we pop over to Kala?
Okay.
And her papa, as they're having some chai. I believe it's chai. A little coffee drink at the table.
Sometimes all my good fortune makes me wonder whether I'm actually appreciating it enough. And if I'm honest, I have to admit that no, I'm not sure I am. Which then makes me think that there must be some flaw in my personality or my brain chemistry, which means I just have to get used to the fact that no matter what happens, I'm never going to be a person who can ever just feel happy.
Come now, that's not true. Few children in the world ever smiled as easily as my daughter did.
What happened to that girl?
Do you remember the doll you wanted so badly on your birthday? It had red hair.
I know.
Thought how you prayed and prayed for that doll. On your birthday, the whole family had come over. There was this huge pile of presents on the table, but none of that mattered. It was like you had those X-ray vision. You went straight to it, ripped it open, and that was it. Party over.
I love that doll.
As adults, we learn to carefully open all the rest of the presents. We are taught to smile and to pretend they are all equally important to us. But our heart always knows the truth.
But what if the truth is something that can cause people to feel unhappy or disappointed or hurt? You know, there are times I wish I could go back to being that little girl. My life was much easier then. But I'm a woman now, and part of being a woman is understanding that hearts are complicated things.
Yeah. They are indeed.
Are hearts complicated? Or is it that the mind complicates the heart?
Well, that's a good question. I would say, just sticking right to this clip, it is the growing up, it is the mind that complicates. Because as a little girl, you just go for what you want. You don't question the heart or analyze it or try to get it to fit in to society or calculate how that's going to affect other people around you. You just live from that heart. But if we look at it the other side, what is complicated or uncomplicated, that has to do with how we interpret it, right? There is no complication in any... The only way something can be complicated is when we're trying to understand or interpret it, and therefore then that is the mind. So for the mind to understand the heart, then it's the union between the two that can only even make that question.
Between the sun and moon?
Yes. Right? Like you can't, no, the heart can't be complicated. It doesn't analyze. It just is. So yes, it would be the mind's interpretation of the heart that would make it feel complicated.
Another amazing scene where we have a supporting character supporting and being awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, totally great.
There's so many aspects to take in this one clip, but I want to start at the beginning. I just want to point out that she talks about all her good fortune. It's almost like she's not deserving of having sadness or confusion or uncertainty because she has good fortune. I think this is actually a really common theme, especially with a lot of my clients, because we're working with people who do have good lives. Our society emphasizes survival and struggle, right? And so if you have a good life, there's a sense you should just shut up and appreciate it. So that means that you have to be having misery, like you have to have exterior miserable situations in order to justify the emotional spectrum, which is within all of us. So we're just going to take this theme through the whole episode, but if we step out of survival mode, we almost have a guilt for being human. The whole point of moving beyond survival mode is to be able to experience all of our emotions, and yet we have guilt about experiencing some of them because we think that if we're not in survival mode, if life is good enough that we don't have to survive, that we aren't worthy, we aren't allowed to have some of the different emotions or conflicts that we justify in people who are struggling.
To me, this is a very, I don't have the answer for this myself personally, but I think about how much beauty I'm surrounded by and how much beauty, and I mean natural beauty, like nature is beautiful and the animal kingdom is beautiful. Like there's so much natural beauty that surrounds us outside of the materialistic beauty that people have built. But how is it that we can still be in uncomfortable situations and with fear and guilt and jealousy and anger and all these things? How, to me, it's not a logical thing that we can be surrounded by beauty and yet still not find happiness. Because, I don't know, that's just one of my things. I haven't figured that out yet. And I think she's surrounded by beauty. She has a very fortunate life. And yet she's still struggling with her ability not to be as happy as she was as when she was a kid. Because she's looking for these conditions to be fulfilled, or because society tells her she has to be one way or another.
Well, so if we take that to the story about the doll, and I love what her father says to her at this point. We are trained, right? When she was a little kid, she might have enjoyed all the other toys, but she didn't care in that moment. She knew what she wanted. She knew before she even opened it where to go to it. Her heart just led her to it. And even though there was a ton of other presents, she was fulfilled, because she could have had 1,000 presents, and if she didn't have that one, that was the one that she wanted. So what he's saying is, we're taught to appreciate everything, everyone in the same way, right? And to give as much value to different aspects. But in our true nature, our soul is going to know what we want, what's going to bring us the most joy. What brings you joy isn't necessarily going to bring me joy. What society or friends could tell me, you have it so great, I wish I was you, they can never understand what my heart really longs for. And if I don't allow myself to honor all aspects of my heart, the truth of my heart, that I could have the most brilliant life, and if I haven't fulfilled that deepest part within me that is seeking to be fulfilled, not by some teacher's method or by what society tells me should fill it or by a spiritual book, but whatever my heart is desiring, then I can put my attention and appreciate and love everything else and be grateful for it. But it's never going to fill this part of my heart that has not yet been filled yet. I could, if I were a Kala and I opened up 1,000 presents, but that one present that my heart longed the most for wasn't there, I could train myself to appreciate all the others. I could tell myself I could find appreciation in them, but that doesn't mean that part of my heart would be full. And I think that's just important for us to acknowledge and be okay with. It's okay. It's okay that our heart longs for something. And what our heart longs for might not be what the neighbor's heart longs for.
Awesome. So what else about this clip?
Well, I wanted to go back into the childlike wonder, that longing to go back. Well, there's two things. And when we watched this episode, Zac, you and I had a couple things happen. In the Consciously Awesome alumni community, I was teaching and we were talking about finding that wonder in life that makes us want to wake up every morning and creating space again for that childlike wonder and allowing that in, which is really important. And I think it's really important in that longing that she feels to go back. But then we also watched a video from my new favorite video channel. I don't even know what it's called. Beau
of the Fifth Column.
Is that what it's called?
YouTube,
Beau of the Fifth Column. But he was talking about not looking back, that we have to be forward thinking, not trying to go back someplace.
Right. That the cause, he in that particular thing, he was talking about America, and the point in our descent was when we stopped looking forward at the future, and when we went back into the nostalgia of what we thought this particular nation stood for or whatever. So it was like that was kind of the tipping point when culture decided to look back instead of forward. Right. And here Kala
is longing a little bit to look back because nostalgia does we do want to go back to an easier time. Like that's natural. Nostalgia is something that I think is just part of human nature. It's like almost it's an emotion. It might as well be on the list of emotions because it is. It's a frequency that we tap into, and we're going to remember the past different than it really happened. Like that's just part of this whole experience. So I think it's like if we're going to look back only to remember the parts of ourselves that we might have lost and then welcome them back into the present and carry on and imagine how we could use them in the future. That would be what I would say.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Sheila.
So what I liked after that, was there anything else about this clip that you wanted to bring up?
Not this particular clip, but what happens right after.
Yeah. You want to bring that up?
So she was kind of talking about childlike wonder and how to be fulfilled. That's kind of what I got out of that last conversation. And then we have a little song that gets cued. And I was like, hey, is that I didn't look it up, but I was like, is that Jack Johnson? Because I'm a big fan of Jack Johnson. He does folk music and stuff. And I was like, man, this song could have been out of like Curious George or something. That was my remark, because I know in the past he was he made a soundtrack for one of the newish, I guess it's old now, but Curious George movies. And it was just about sharing life experiences together is better.
Yeah. And then it's another montage, magic music. Magic music montage. Thank you, Ethan, and all of your friends. But yeah, they moved between, I mean, it was so beautiful. They moved between, like, that's when we see Sun with her dog and just taking her time, going to sleep, getting her face licked, eating for the first time since, eating her, the food that was made in love for her. And Capheus is there, and it's the sharing with each other. But yeah, that childlike wonder goes right into the next scene, which then, of course, gets darker. But that's the way we do.
Yeah,
that's the way we do.
You can go along for the ride, right?
Yeah. Should we do another clip?
Sure. So the next clip we have here is Whispers comes to Will. And then Will goes to Whispers, and they're having a little conversation in London, I believe.
Yep, that is London.
The Black Plague revealed our vulnerabilities, and it terrified people. And so what did they do?
They built temples to the immortal like this. Vertical lines descend from heaven, with all the might of the Lord bearing down on a single point until it is utterly and irrevocably crushed.
Let me guess. I'm that single point.
No. I don't expect you to understand me or my work.
I'm not a misunderstood psychopath.
I'm trying to engineer a future with a species that is more violent, intolerant, and possessive than any species in the history of this planet. Sapiens live in a world designed by their worst fears. And nothing terrifies them like difference.
You save your fucking justifications. You murdered an innocent girl. I know you killed Sarah Patrol.
Ouch. Whisper got in some digs in this scene. There was some more to that, too, and he got another one at the end. We're like, who is that? I don't even know who you're talking about. But I love this scene, and I wanted to pick this one out and talk about Whispers, because I think this is, to me, what's appealing to Whispers as a bad guy is that he is a psychopath, and we kind of want to dig into his mind. I do anyway. I think that's what makes him interesting, his motivation, because what he does isn't that interesting to me, personally. I don't think so. Just slicing people up, kidnapping people. That's boring as far as villains go. But his motivations are intriguing, and him as a homo sensorium is intriguing. And the metaphor that he uses in this scene was really, I think it could be telling about his motivations and what type of character he is. Now, I don't strike Whispers as somebody who would believe in God per se or spirit or anything. However, the metaphor that he's talking about in this is that, and he even says that he's the one who knows the truth and is being crushed by the weight of the Lord with this truth. Not in those words, in his own words. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, maybe Whispers feels like he has some obligation to fulfill this truth that was bestowed upon him by the weight of the Lord. This is all me speculating, of course, because we really don't have the answers to this, but I just thought it was really interesting about this too. And another thing about this whole metaphor to me is what his version of truth is, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, freedom is the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is understanding our natural, the essence of our being, the essence that is unchanged, the essence that carries on after we put down our bodies for good. To me, I think that is the truth that sets us free. When we understand the essence of what is carrying us around in this physical reality, because the only thing that is real is the thing that doesn't change. And that is our essence, right? Everything else around us is just change. Change. But there's an essence behind everything. So to me, typically finding the truth and finding oneness and expanding your identity of self to include everything else around you, because that's kind of an understood spiritual truth, and that can be experienced, and all our gurus come back and say, hey, this is awesome, why don't you try this, right? And a reminder. But for Whispers, his truth can kill him, it can crush him, it can weigh him down, it doesn't set him free. It's a huge burden to know the truth. So I just think it was really interesting on how, to me, his truth is kind of the opposite of truth. It might be grounded in a physical reality, but where this truth gives no freedom to anything. Not really. Like, he thinks it's going to give freedom to the homo sensoriums, but that's not really a realistic outcome of his science experiments.
Well, he's lacking empathy, which is very fascinating as a homo sensorium.
Right. Or is he overriding it?
He might be overriding it. Something overrid it. And at this point, we don't know what that was. We don't know where his cluster is or who his cluster is. We just have this single sensorium solving a problem in a very mechanical, logic-based way, alone. And another thing is he sees the greater good. He doesn't see individual human life as more valuable than the goal, which, like, that's how you do war, right? You can't be concerned about the individual losses. They're nameless to him. Like, death is nameless to him. But then so is life. This is a rabbit hole, because it's our fear of death that drives us so much. If we don't fear death, we can make some different decisions. Can we not fear death and also maintain empathy? And is that the most powerful force? But he's also talking about Homo sapiens being the most fear-based.
Right. Their whole society is based in what they fear.
So he's shut down all emotions, really. He's emotionless from what we can tell. So he doesn't have fear, but he also doesn't have love. There's just nothing there left there. It's just a logical conclusion. It's reminding me of, we watched She-Ra, the new She-Ra, and the princess, the computer princess. Do you remember her name?
No.
Yeah. I loved her character, and I didn't know where she was going to go with it, but she was fascinating, and it's the same theory as Whispers, basically. It's just she was so into her. For sure. She was so into her enjoying the journey. It is a way of enjoying the journey, but it was enjoying the journey in her experiments and complete, like, even for herself, like, whatever, And there's a sense he's not trying, like, he said he's going to be crushed. Whisper's going to be crushed. So he's kind of assuming his life is going to end, and he's just going to do as much as he can before he goes. He's a fascinating psychopath. But psychopaths are fascinating, really. That's why there's so many shows.
People aren't psychopaths. It's like, how do you do that? That's so interesting. How do you not have empathy? Wow. It really is fascinating.
And yet so many people try not to have empathy. So there's probably a bit of jealousy that, I mean, none of us want to admit that, but there's probably a little bit of jealousy when we see a psychopath like, man.
I wish I could not care about a damn thing, right?
There's got to be. I mean, I think we appreciate
It's not true. He does care. He's, I hope I get this quote right. I heard it once, but the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, he has some good intentions.
Right? I mean, he does. He wants his species, at least that's what he's telling us, to be okay and safe and to live in. He's trying to achieve balance with Homo sapiens for Homo sensoriums. At least that's what he's telling him.
Right, and at least that's what he's telling, and that's what Angelica fell for. Because it is a good answer to our question, like, what was Angelica doing with Whispers? But he made logical, even with her. So it's interesting that I'm thinking of her now, because she may have longed. She's, like, on fire with empathic abilities, right? Like, she just felt everything. And I think she probably longed for that logical balance, the sun and the moon, the yin and the yang, and it made sense to her. And we are trying to balance a logical path with an emotional path. So, yeah, pretty interesting. I also, I'm a Dan Brown fan, and it really, with talking about the architecture and relating that over. And then a lot of his books have a character who has made a conclusion about how to save the world. And it's usually includes a lot of people dying, So I felt a little Dan Brown energy in there. Whether they did or not, I don't know. But it reminded me of his work. All right, so we have another clip, right?
We sure do. And so next we're going to skip on over to a little dinner party conversation with Kala's family and Rajan's family. I do like that they show, people sitting down eating together a lot. Like, that's really cool. I appreciate that. So here we go. We have a little heated discussion between the fathers.
These extremists won't be happy until they've dragged the entire world back to dark ages.
I'm not sure that's what they're after, but I do take your point.
Maybe we should just discuss a more pleasant subject.
Good point.
This Banjari ghost is incredible.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
The balance between spice and masala.
Sayam, you've totally outdone yourself.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, Sayam, do you understand the kind of the future world these terrorists hope to build with their bombs?
It's not for me to speak for them.
Well, somebody should. Somebody should, because they themselves obviously can't speak any other language besides violence.
Maybe that was the language that was taught to them.
Oh, don't tell me you are one of those liberals who really believes these psychopaths who murder innocent civilians, they themselves are the victims.
No. I'm one of those silly people who believe that if you kill someone, you should be tried for it. Whether you're a psychopath, a policeman, or a president.
You're worse than a liberal.
Daya, may I have some of the dal?
Can I give you some rice?
You know, not only the ghost.
One sec. Hold on. Let me ask you something, Manindra. As a government insider, tell me, since the British left, the structure of power, the distribution of wealth, these things remain almost identical. And sometimes I ask myself, why? Maybe a man as smart as you can finally answer this question for me.
I think I'll have a bit more dal myself.
Yes, I think so. It's very good, right? Really, I'm having so much of the dal.
In my humble opinion, Sanyam, societies remain unchanged because the human beings remain unchanged. Not everyone is born to be a great leader. Just as not everyone is born to be a cook.
Okay, I see. Well, spending a lifetime in the kitchen learning how to cook was my destiny. Just as inheriting a fortune was yours.
Who's having flashbacks to their Thanksgiving dinner? for
Not
the U.S.
me.
listeners. No, we didn't have that. But there was a lot of talk on social media leading up to last week's Thanksgiving in the U.S. where people were talking about their holiday dinner with different political views.
I mean, we did sit down after watching "Sorry to Bother You" by Boots Riley, starring Michael Summers.
Yes.
And so I had talks about that, but it wasn't over. It wasn't over Thanksgiving.
And it was just two of you. The rest of us went to bed.
Right. Just talking about the metaphors and the philosophies of it.
That's good dialogue. But it's interesting just at how much, so everybody just wanted to keep the peace there and pretend, let's just talk about the food, and yet so much gets said.
Yeah, and I really like this, I like the Wachowskis and J. Michael Straczynski because everything's really gray because you can kind of see both sides of the spectrum in this conversation. I can.
Well, isn't that the whole, that's their point. Because it's not for the two characters having dinner, it's for us. So we can grow by seeing more sides and having dialogue and not being afraid to have that dialogue. But there's just so many points in there. There's the whole fear is in there, this psychopath, and the idea, so we've got the idea of terrorism and who do we call a terrorist and how did they become a terrorist? Who taught them to become a terrorist? How did we interpret that was their way? And why can they only speak with bombs? Well, most likely because somebody wasn't listening to them before the bombs. I mean, to me, that's a logical sequence.
Yeah.
The whole idea in there, just this loaded thing where he, are you a liberal? Are you one of those liberals? And he's like, I'm someone that believes you should be punished for
me
killing.
Too. It doesn't matter who you are. How about,
And he names the cops and he names the
president.
And I can see why the United States wasn't so cool on this show getting a season 3.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if you were going to say something about that earlier too. Even with Whispers, there's a lot of repetition in this show about Homo sapiens and how we live our lives.
Yeah,
like it is a common thread throughout a lot of this, right?
Well, and it's interesting too because then in this they talk about how he doesn't think that society is going to change because the humans aren't changing, and he's sitting there at dinner with a sapien, or with a sensorium, and the changing evolution right in his face, and we are changing, but the stories haven't changed yet because at this point in the episode, they're not. So in our world, we aren't coming together, but that's why it's such a threat when we come together. And as this episode evolves, we start to see when we come together the power that we can have when conscious people, if we just translate it to everyday life, when conscious people come together, the human does evolve. The human is evolving, and therefore society will eventually evolve as a result.
At least we hope so, right?
That's my plan. It appears to be the Wachowskis and Straczynskis and all the writers' plan too.
They wrote a story to help us out with that.
That was so sweet of them.
Yeah. Thanks for the change.
Well, I mean, think about it. It is already. I mean, we know this podcast is about living it, but it has already brought people together and let people claim who they are a little bit more. It's given us hope during a difficult time. It's just so important, and that's why so many people around the world came together through this, because they saw this and they said, oh yes, I'm one of them. I see the world this way. and we came together, and that's awesome.
I agree. All right, so let's go to our next clip. We have the cluster getting ready to make a big decision.
Yeah, so this is kind of what we were leading up to and the big shift of the episode.
Yeah, and in this clip, so leading up to this clip, we have Leto again going back to the bar where he kissed the bartender back then and really inspired the bartender to live an inspired life, right? And then he says to Leto, "Oh, Leto, I had the best year of my life," basically is what he said, and he got married to his Pepe, who was there as well, and that was really important for Leto to see. Right, that was kind of a turning point that Leto kind of understood by being authentic, he could have a big impact on people's lives. He might not be an actor per se, but he's still, he's a figure.
Right.
He is a public figure still somehow. And but anyway, so that was a very awesome scene leading up to where we're going to listen to now, which is here.
You're right. Nothing changes if we keep playing it safe. Look at me. Look at us. Hiding in holes. Whispers has turned me into a fugitive. He's got me acting like one and thinking like one. I'm not. I'm a cop. The fugitive runs because he's alone. The cop knows he's not. The whisper showed me something. It's something I've been missing. It's the scale of this fight. Why does BPO have so many resources? It has to be because there is a lot more of us out there than we thought. We need
To find them. Vincent, this is Riley. We risk so much to get you free, Riley. It seems very dangerous to me, exposing ourselves like this. Vincent offered us protection.
Guys, are we really gonna put our lives in the hands of someone like Vincent?
What do you mean, someone like Vincent?
Someone who doesn't like his movies. Nah. Well, tasting movies says a lot about someone.
Son.
You can't win a fight protecting yourself.
A coded media alert can make it almost impossible for cops to respond fast enough.
Not just the plan. What do you think about the risk itself?
Your life is either defined by the system or by the way you defy the system.
Wolfgang? Fear never fixed anything.
Fear never fixed anything. Super cool clip. Watching this the second, I always get to see more when I'm watching this the second time over. This is my second viewing. But on this one, they're all pitching together to make this decision, they're actually looking themselves in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, that's way cool. So like they're trying to find the answers within themselves,
right,
if they want to make this huge decision because they're going to expose themselves again,
mm-hmm,
and possibly compromise Riley again. And they just like they went through a lot to get her out of the last place. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and it's really compromising all of them.
Right.
But so starting with the theme that they all say in one way or another, you can't win playing safe, and Will saying, I'm acting like a fugitive. That's not who I am. They've got me thinking and acting like a fugitive. A fugitive feels alone. A cop, the difference is a cop knows that there's more of them, right? That there are more. Though this is just how the world controls us and how we choose not to be
I couldn't
controlled.
not think of the whole surf aristocratic or surf royalty dynamic we have going on, right? And then especially in our society here in America, we let technology kind of divide ourselves. Not even just like politically and all this kind of stuff. We're all on our own cell phones now. And less people are kind of engaging with reality. And so like we're kind of like getting soloed out, voluntarily speaking. And so we kind of, everybody feels alone. And that's why Sense8's amazing, is because people saw this and they didn't feel alone anymore. Right. So that was a huge deal. But to me, I look at our behaviors and technology and where we're going and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, our environment is making us think we're something we're not. It's very Matrixy, if you ask me. And I know he's just talking about being a fugitive, but if I dig a little bit deeper and our own environment and how we feel alone, right? And we're in survival and we don't, there's tribalism and all this kind of stuff they think about. Instead of a cop, there's a whole police force and they have backup and they think differently because they know they have a different perception. So anyway, and then coming together, we'll talk about that here in a second.
Well, and I think that is what,
so that's why the show got taken off Netflix.
We're just going to say that all the time now. And look, this is also why. And I'm not saying this is Netflix.
Right.
It's higher than believe me, Netflix is not BPO.
Do not expose the truth about the establishment or our mental matrix.
Well, we have this going back in history for a very long time. We've got the real witch hunts, which aren't the witch hunts going on now. The actual witch hunts where they burned women of power and even some men and segregated and kept everyone in hiding. I mean, it goes back into ancient stories, even of Magdalene and the reduction. And I'm not talking about just females. We're talking about the heart center, right? So when the heart center opens up and has power, then the establishment of that time will try to suppress it and seclude it, because when that power comes together, and it amplifies. When we come together, it amplifies. So this is a storyline that we've been dealing with for a long time. We're just newbies here, and we're not newbies here. Like, as far as we think that we're doing this for the first time, but we're not. This story has been going on for a long time. What happens, I think, to us as humans, and I think that technology and survival and fear are tools that are used to separate us and keep us secluded. I think not being understood, not feeling like someone understands us, secludes us as well. So when we become belittled or unheard for our voice of consciousness, of seeing the bigger picture, of understanding that there's something beyond the fear-based mentality, that we could move beyond survival into something creative and beautiful. When we experience that and we don't get validified by that because we get suppressed, or even, to be honest, even the rest of the people at the dinner party that were just trying to talk about the masala, they were doing that. They're like, don't speak your truth. That's a very subtle message of, I would rather not see who you are than experience the conflict that might come from your disagreement, right? So we do it to each other. And so to move beyond that and to come together, this is a huge, huge turning point in the story arc of Sense8, when we come out of fear